This edition of MacVoices is brought to you by SupportYourApp. Developers, get outstanding outsourced customer support for your app. Find out how they can take care of your customers while you grow your business at SupportYourApp.com. MacVoices is in San Jose for AltConf and WWDC. I'm Chuck Joyner. Folks, this time we get to talk to Michael Devins, product manager for Jamf, about what Jamf is doing here at WWDC and their reaction to the keynote. Michael, it's good to see you.
Great to be here, thanks.
So what is Jamf doing here? I mean, obviously you're gathering more information, but what did you think of the keynote?
Yeah, it's exciting to be here for WWDC in any capacity. And for those that aren't familiar with Jamf, our mission is to help organizations succeed with Apple. And so we provide solutions for everyone from non-IT to very specialized complex IT workflows to put Apple devices in the hands of end users, whether that's at work or at school. And so obviously we have a keen interest on what Apple's doing in the space, especially around new operating system capabilities. Some of that relates directly to what we do, and some of that is about what's going to drive demand for the end users that we're ultimately supporting.
You know, Jamf has been on the show a number of times. You provide a phenomenal service. We've talked about your conference for Jamf users, and so I think a lot of our listeners are going to be familiar with you. So I guess the first question, and this was asked by someone I sat with at the keynote, is any of the announcements that Apple made, the security announcements, we're shutting down the like buttons and some of these things, how is that going to affect Jamf?
Yeah, it's a great question. And there's a great sort of split when you talk about security and privacy. And on the one hand, what an organization needs to do to secure a device and ensure that user data is private and protected. And then there's that end user experience, not having ads autoplay and not having those sort of follow me around the web. And so, while every year new operating systems bring deprecations to APIs or different management frameworks, nothing that we've seen thus far indicates any critical functionality change for a management platform. Obviously, a lot more to learn this week, and we've got teams dedicated to adding that compatibility and any new capabilities. But really, what's beautiful is Apple can continue to focus on the privacy and the user experience on your Mac or your iPad or your iPhone. And that sort of doesn't interfere with what IT needs to do to make sure that your device is properly configured and secure. So it's a win on both fronts.
That's good to hear, because I know people that rely on Jamf, not just for their business, but also sometimes for managing their family's devices, which I think is a really great use that doesn't always get talked about enough.
Yeah, it's really interesting. So many people think, great, I want to manage the devices I have at work, but I've got a collection growing at home as well, and especially a lot of people on Jamf now are families, right? People that are saying, well, I get this is kind of a business tool, but there's real practical value for me. One thing that was exciting to me yesterday was the screen time capabilities and sort of the marriage of native iOS functionality, things that maybe aren't even totally accessible to a management provider in a traditional MDM. As a parent, I think about having those capabilities as a nice marriage, not just to maybe getting an app or a setting on a device, but to be able to actually have some of that screen time and awareness and control. So there's a nice marriage between what parents can do with iOS 12 and what you can already do with MDM solution like Jamf Now or Jamf Pro.
Yeah, listen, I know I'm not married, I don't have kids, but I manage a fleet of devices of my own. And so it's trying to keep them up to speed and all the apps installed where I want them. It can get a little challenging at times. In fact, I showed up here the other day with an app not loaded on that particular iPad that should have been, and had to go and find a Wi-Fi hotspot or tether to my phone. And it would have been so much nicer if I could have just been able to do a checklist before I left and say, oh, okay, install this over here and be ready.
Yeah, it's amazing what Apple has built in terms of an ecosystem and a platform, not just the new emojis or Memoji we saw yesterday, things driving end user interest and demand, but really they've built such a robust management framework around iOS, macOS, and tvOS is getting a lot of that now as well. And it really allows an organization or an individual to say, this is what I need, I rely on these devices, these tools, and having the confidence that that configuration is there, the content is there, not having to do so much ambiguous troubleshooting, but there's a solution, and I can trust it and rely on it, hotspots notwithstanding.
Well, I love I love your product because it is accessible. You hear MDM and think, and that's mobile device management, folks, in case you missed it. And it sounds like, that's not for me. That's a little sophisticated. And you make it so easy, and I really, really appreciate that about it. but it's also powerful.
Yeah, it's interesting. You know, for the better part of a decade, we had one product. It formerly was the Casper Suite, now Jamf Pro, and it really became the Swiss Army knife of the complexity of these really capable workflows. Large organizations like IBM putting 100,000 Macs in the hands of their employees with their user choice. And that almost sort of put us out of helping a lot of people that maybe want the capabilities without the complexity. And so to be able to have the confidence of now Jamf Pro saying we can solve for these complex workflows, let's solve for a different sort of persona that needs some of these capabilities, but I'm not IT. This is like a task, or this is a hat that I wear, and how can I obfuscate some of that complexity, making it about what do I want to do, not what boxes do I need to check. And it's a beautiful sort of parity between Jamf Pro with the complexity and Jamf Now with the accessibility to say, really anyone can do MDM because it's a really accessible product that anyone can get a handle on.
But and I argue that with people about this constantly. You can't have the power that you want with Jamf Pro and not have some of the complexity. You can't. You can get in a paper glider and fly around, or you can, get in a 747. The 747 by its nature has got to be more complex.
There is a sentiment of truth to that, but there's also sort of that's the gauntlet that we face, right? Like, how do we not sacrifice capability, and how do we sort of minimize that complexity? And there's so much that we have the ability to do. It's just about keeping up and finding the time. Apple introduces new stuff, and there goes half the roadmap. We gotta go support all these new things. But what's exciting is that we can continue to simplify. We have all sorts of aspirations to be able to make not only Now more accessible and simple, but Pro as well, because I have a need for a complex workflow doesn't necessarily mean I want the complexity. And so that's a mission that we'll continue to strive for, is making not just the consumer-friendly tools accessible, but Pro as well. There's a lot more that we can do to that.
I'm a little embarrassed that I don't know the answer to this question before I ask it, but I'll take a shot. Does Jamf offer any control if you're controlling my iOS devices? Are you potentially controlling, or can you control my watch, the apps on my watch?
Yeah, I'm waiting for the slide at WWDC where they say watchOS is now an independent platform, a managed platform. Today, Apple treats Apple Watch as an accessory to an iPhone, right? So anyone that has a watch needs an iPhone. And as such, the management of some of the watch functionality can be managed by way of the iPhone that's connected, but there's no enrolling a watch independent of that, and there's not an independent management framework for watchOS. So we can monitor some of the settings associated with that in the eyes of MDM accessory, but not at this time is watchOS a dedicated platform like Mac, Apple TV, or iOS.
It occurs to me because I think the watch is becoming more and more a tool, and I'm seeing more and more people use it in a business setting as opposed to just a personal setting.
Yeah, you think iOS, you see iPads and iPhones everywhere. That makes sense, and the Mac has been sort of that desktop or that laptop workstation that people use in all sorts of ways. Apple TV is emerging as a really compelling platform, and Apple's added some new capabilities this week to manage the software update and to push apps. The future of TV is apps, right? Not just from an entertainment perspective. But the watch is another sneaky one. Like, you see it especially in the service industry. We see it a lot in healthcare, where it's that quick glance, that notification, what's my next patient, what does the customer need? That really is transforming the industry, and not about putting a face in a device, but about having the right information and then sort of obfuscating the device and the tech, getting it out of the way so it maintains more of that human interaction. That's what's most exciting about Apple Watch to me.
Yeah, and you're right. Everything is evolving. Everything is evolving, and it's a challenge for you all to keep up. But so let me ask you this to wrap up: as a Jamf user, if there are Jamf users out there, Jamf Pro or Jamf Now, what changes or what new things can they expect as a result of today's announcements?
So our mission is to help organizations succeed with Apple, and that first means that the stuff that worked before has to work in the fall, right? And that's we've got multiple teams and already digging into the betas and making sure that all the things you expect to function on macOS Mojave or iOS 12 or the new tvOS will continue to work. And so we really our world aligns with Apple because that's the only platform we support, and we're the only vendor that can be here and adjust all of our releases and all of our priorities around what Apple's doing in the space. And so that confidence in your deployment being maintained even through a major OS release is what we pride ourselves on in our day zero support. Also adding some of these new key capabilities. There's so much that Apple continues to add to the management framework of devices. We take for granted that we want this stuff to continue to work, let alone have access to the new things as well. And that zero-day release that we push out in the fall, sort of in tandem or hopefully ahead of Apple, is how we deliver not just the compatibility, but also the new capabilities that the operating systems are coming out with, and that's what Jamf does.
Michael, thanks so much for the time. I know you have other things to do here, but I appreciate you talking to us.
Yeah, thanks, Chuck.
Oh, I'm sorry. Jeez, what's wrong with me? The website, of course, the website where folks go to learn more about all this.
Jamf.com, Jamf.
Perfect. Thank you. Okay, not enough sleep, guys. Until the next time, I'm Chuck Joyner. Thanks for watching. Visit MacVoices.com for show notes and to connect with Chuck on social media. Get involved in our MacVoices Facebook group and get more out of your Apple tech with MacVoices magazine, free on Flipboard. And if you find value in it all, consider supporting us at patreon.com/MacVoices and join these folks who help keep MacVoices coming to you. Advertising handled by Backbeat Media at backbeatmedia.com. Bandwidth provided by CacheFly at cachefly.com.